I want to change the color of my map, but it's also changing the color of my woman, which is not what I want. So I need to tell you again that it's this little button right there. Now that is really just blending into the map. I know it seems like it's blending into the woman, but the map is blending into the woman. Make sense? So this is not also affecting her. It really should just be only affecting the map because of checking that little checkbox, and the blue, you know, it's a little much. Maybe we want to go in and around these greener tonalities. I'll stick there. All right. Now that that's set, it's kind of still a little edgy and harsh. If I double-click the layer and I go down here to my blend if controls and hold the Option key and split these sliders, look how much more subtle that is becoming. This is the ooh-ah part. Ooh, ah. And this is what you would not be able to do if you just used the blend mode square on. Huge difference, I think. I think it's a pretty huge difference. So I'm able to control that shadow area is not getting as much map on it, and a little bit less of the highlight is getting on the map, so it's much more in this mid-tone range. So it's happening right here between 78 and 192 of the 255 steps of the 8-bit mask that's inherently built in. Yes? All right. Again, if I split the top sliders, this is the top layer, you're not really going to see that much of an exciting effect with this. It's unsplit here, but just less map. And again, here I'll have more skin tone. All right, so this is bringing back a little bit more of that skin tone underneath. All right, I'm going to call that good and click OK. And if I do Command Z, right, you can see Iceland or Greenland up there. See the difference? Is that projecting differently? Right, so a lot softer. And then again, I can use a layer mask on this because this is a color adjustment mask, and I can mask on it and bring back any of this warm color if I so wanted to. Now that's a little bit more than I really wanted to do, but I can bring my brush opacity down to something very low like a 30 and warm some of these tonalities up. So those are the calculation and the blend if methods. One last thing would probably be wise to do here, just because it's really scary to see a map on someone's eyes. Let's just zoom out a little bit here. Okay, and I will turn these back to black and white by clicking on the revert chip and black to the front. Checking out my brush size, decreasing the size. Opacity should be up at 100. And wrong layer. Okay, I need to add a layer mask to the map. So here it goes. Now there's a layer mask on it. And now the actual flesh tone of the eyes are in. And I probably should use my favorite tool, which is the polygon lasso. I'm not supposed to play favorites, but I do love this tool. I really do. And I like to make sure that if I'm going to clean out this eye, I don't want any of that map on the lid. Now that's a pretty rough selection, but I can choose this, which you may or may not use, Refine Edge. And refining the edge of the selection here, I can change the view to Layer Mask, or that's my output. I want to change the view to on black. Okay, and with this, I can now smooth the edge of my selection a little bit. That'll be just fine. And maybe feather it a tad. Perfect. Okay, and it's going to create a layer mask, and the layer mask is there. And I'm going to invert it, right? My layer mask is opposite, Command I. So now if we look in this eye, ooh, ah, okay, really nice clean effect there. So if you don't know that trick, I'm going to show it to you again. I'm going to use the polygon lasso tool, and I'm going to do my very quick selection of the other eye. I want to keep the inner part of the lid and this little spot there. This is what makes this look really spooky and cool, is that the eyes don't have the effect on it. Okay? Right, then I'm going to come over here to my refine edge and increase the smoothness and give it a hair of feather. Okay. And I'm going to output it to a selection, because really where I want to apply that is here on the mask side, Option Delete and deselect. And yes, I could have just used a paintbrush and painted freehand, which I'll do on the mouth, just to give you the impression of what that would look like. And yeah, I would probably use a selection for that, but and now we have something that's much more interesting and impressive. So it's a combination of all those tools together. All right. Do you need to take a breath? I do. I'll take a breath. All right, so just quickly, I want to head back over here, what we have already accomplished. And we have about a half an hour before we do questions and answers. Jumping back here to my agenda, is we looked at layer masks. We looked at adjustment layers with masks. We looked at basic extracting a mask from a channel. And we looked at the difference between using channel mixing for black and white. I've not covered the pen tool, but I did look a little bit at that brush with the overlay method to separate those hairs out. And the next topic I want to segue into is going to be smart objects. Now, smart objects, I know a few people raise their hands that they use them, but the real beauty of smart objects is that you can use either an Illustrator or a Photoshop file in a smart object in Photoshop to create a non-destructive element that you can then distort or puppet warp and always have the best quality for that image in your composite. The best thing to realize, though, or an important thing to realize, is that there are many different ways to turn something that you bring into your composite into a smart object. Your smart object can be opened as a smart object, or pasted as a smart object, or converted to a smart object. For what I am going to show you, I believe that the best way to put this smart object in is with a copy and paste. And the reason why I say that is because you want to have the original document as a Photoshop document, the thing that's going to be the smart object, so that if and when you want to do changes to it, you're not trying to recreate it from scratch and actually creating a gap in your production cycle, and because it's going to be ready to go. So what I'm going to do now is give you a demonstration about how to use a smart object to make a composite, and then how to change the smart object into something completely different, making a radical change to your work. Ready? All right, here we go. I think I should save that. It was just too exciting to not save it. Awesome map lady face person. All right, she can go away for now. Let me close all these up. I'm not going to save any changes. And always have extra things to play with. But what I'm going to open now is a really cool little thing. It's this little miniature toy landscape. That's a toy landscape where the top and the bottom half of the image have been kind of distorted and lightened quite a bit to create a sense of surrealistic focus on the image. And then I'm going to open up the other image that I'm going to be using for the smart object, and that's going to be this little car. So I have this little car. In this image, I've already created an alpha channel to cut it out with. I did that before you got here. So here's what I'm going to do. The first thing I'm going to do is select all and copy, and this is called car. And I'm going to come over to the landscape, zoom out just a hair, and make sure I can see my layers panel. I'm going to put this channels back into layers and paste, Command V. Now, that is not what I wanted to have happen at all. However, I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to do it this way. File, and I'm going to choose Place Linked. This is how you want to do it. You ready? Place Linked. And when I want to place linked, even though it's already open, I'm not grabbing it from a copy and paste, but rather placing it inside this document. And there it has this happy little X over it. And when I hit return, it automatically has this little link. See that little link there? Yes, that link, that tiny, minuscule link that you can hardly see, is a part of this whole situation here. And in fact, I'm going to go to Panel Options, make sure I am on the largest one I am. It just feels really small, so I'll just use Image Bounds. Not helpful at all. Okay, so let me just put it back the way it was. Panel Options, back to this way. All right. So this image exists. It's called car. It is linked to this image. If I go over to the image now, car, and I go to select, load selection, and I load my car layer, and I invert it, select invert, and delete the background, and save it. When I come back, the linked image, the smart object, now has the background removed. Yay, us. Okay? So that's a huge help. That's just one part of it, though. So now what I can do is Command T, or I can move this around. I can rotate this. I can do effects on this that will only affect this. Again, adding a very important adjustment layer, using hue saturation on that to bump up, but first to clip the saturation. So I have this happy red flying car. Okay, and I'll close the panel. And then I want to have another one, so I'm going to duplicate the car layer, might as well. And what has to happen here is I need to move one of them. So I press the V to move one, and Command T, and I'm going to shrink this down and shrink it way down, down, and put it over here. Okay, and in fact, I am not a huge fan all the time, yes, I want to place this, of this method of moving things, but if you do like this, show transform controls and auto select layer, all right, and now when I click on something, that layer should be the one that I see the transform handles on, and I can rotate that some more. All right, not only can I do that, but this is going to be really crazy. All right, I'm going to turn off transform handles. Is I can make one color and one another color, and I'll do that. I'll add another adjustment layer to this. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to go to make a new adjustment layer, hue saturation, and I'll make sure that it is clipped to the layer it's going to be applied to, and now this little car over here is green. Yay. All right, so this project is finished, and you put it away, and many weeks later, you decide you need to open it up again. You need to do some other things to it, such as you need to warp some things. So I'm going to make sure the layer is selected, and I'm going to choose this choice called Puppet Warp. Edit, Puppet Warp. Puppet Warp is a really strange tool, because initially what it does is it puts this mesh-like surface on your content. And what you can do is actually use pins. Pins are these little tiny to make marks. And that's what I'm doing now on the thing that you want to do. So I'm clicking at the beginning of and at the end of the wings of this to kind of make this car have more personality. And it's warping. You can see it's warping. And this is what is meant by puppet warp. The puppet aspect is that you can really get a lot of strange effects out of this. So this car starts to have its own complete personality. Okay? Really different than the other one. Puppet warp. Okay. So if I move this down, this one is not puppet warped, and this one is puppet warped. True? True. Right, I'm going to save this as, file save as, and I'm going to save it as cars in space. PSD. Okay. Now here's the totally strange thing. I have these as cars, and I love this, and I backed up the file, and then one day I'm wondering, what would happen if I went to the car file and I changed it? What if I changed this to something else? Well, obviously, if I select all and Command T and I flip it over, I'm going to just flip it over on itself. This is radical. And I hit return and I go back to my cars in space. Nothing has happened because I need to save this first. So I'm saving it, and now if all is right in the world, my cars are going in the opposite direction. Well, they look a little freaky because of the puppet warp. But that change has been made, and I will undo it. Option Command Z. Or if I open up another file, file open, and I get a complete other image, such as a flying fairy doll, and I select all and copy it, and I went into this document and I pasted that. Command T, squish her, right? And in fact, just to make this radical here, I'll rotate her and scale her so she's pretty much covering the car. The point being that Photoshop doesn't care what's in this file. Whatever's in this file, anytime you save it or change it, will make an update in your other file. So there's the alpha channel from the car still being applied to this image, which is completely weird. If I delete that layer and I go to my channels, and I would need to throw this layer away, and again I save and I go back, the mask is still there, which is kind of scary, right? Kind of strange. So be aware that inside of this file here, go to layers, the content is changing color, the content is in the initial position, but what will not go away is that built-in alpha channel. So if I go back again and I Option Command Z and just even trash this layer and save it again, everything should be back to normal. Okay? So highly flexible, can run you into some problems, but also can really enhance your design process. There are a lot of other things that you can do besides puppet warping and or creating elements that are distorted with a smart object. If you come to my Advanced Photoshop class, which starts in September, I'll teach you many more ways of using smart objects, and in fact embedding smart objects into other smart objects to make step and repeat and calculated compositions, kind of mathy stuff if you're into that, and even making your own filters using smart objects and calculations. When you start to use these methods, I think that you'll find your work is going to start to speed up. I'm really glad that you guys all came. If you have any questions or you'd like to review anything that we did, this is a great time to review. Do we have any questions on anything we covered so far? Anybody like to see something again or have a suggestion of something that they would like to see tried? Question, hi there. You're welcome. What is your name?
Gilda.
Thanks for coming, Gilda.
I was wondering, do you create vector masks?
Yes, you can create vector
No, I know,
masks.
but do you use
Do I use vector masks in Photoshop?
versus how you created the previous demonstration?
Do you mean a pen tool mask? Or do you mean just an Illustrator mask?
No, within Photoshop.
Within Photoshop, pen tool masks or vector masks.
Like,
Do I use them?
what I'm saying is, what I'd like to ask is, do you have a vector used for like the quick?
Oh, personally. A personal question. Sometimes I do use vector masks, but to be completely honest with you, only with something that it seems like it's almost impossible to select out any other way, where there's color contrast or a clear delineation of edges against others, I won't use a vector mask. Where I may have an image in the foreground that has a lot of the same colors as image in the background, then I will use a vector mask. I tend to do pretty well with the polygon lasso tool, and in fact have had a competition with my best friend Steve about whose mask looks better, the pen tool mask and the polygon mask. And we had our third business associate do the judging, and he couldn't really tell the difference. I'm a very big fan of the polygon lasso tool. This tool has been my savior for many years, and I use it in a way as such. When I'm using the polygon lasso tool, I make small increments of movement around my selected element, little small. I'm just going to do her head here, erring towards the inside row of the pixels. I also have extremely good vision. Myopic. I only wear glasses for distance, and thank God, because I can still thread a needle. So I can see where these pixels are. That's not everyone. Not everyone can see that well, but I can. So here is my little doll head. Okay.
And you prefer this over the magnetic?
I really don't like the magnetic lasso tool. I know every artist and designer has their preferences, but that tool just makes me want to cry.
Or do you change it sometimes, like use a combo?
Well, I will use a combination of selection tools if I need to select something, but this method there, now that's selected, has been my best method pretty much ever. So there I clicked on the Refine Edge box. If you don't know where that is, I'll show you that again. Up here is Refine Edge. Okay, so you can see my curves are pretty smooth. And it's just little increments of movement. And I've done it for a long time. You know, I've practiced for like 20 years. So here I'll smooth this out a little bit. No, it's really serious. I have practiced for 20 years. If you do this too much, it'll just create, you know, an ellipse. So you don't want that. You have to be very careful. So you can feather a little bit.
How come you don't use Smart Radius?
I do sometimes use Smart Radius. I just didn't use it now. Not doing a darn thing. It will do something, though. When this becomes really handy, the Smart Radius thing, is when you're selecting very thin things like thin grass or hair. But I don't usually do this when I select thin grass or hair either, because I use calculations. Didn't always use calculations, and then this was much more important to me. But since I've more or less mastered calculations, and how you master calculations is you just do them. And as a former photographer in the darkroom, I'm used to taking notes of what I do, so I'll write down what I did for each image to figure out what I liked, and I'll look at it a lot, think about it. So that's how I would select this.
So you wouldn't use calculations for this because it's too easy, it's just against white, but if it was more complicated?
Yeah, and I was really just answering the question regarding pen versus lasso. But I probably would not use calculations on this. It's too easy. I could just do select by color. Right, so I'll just copy that for kicks and giggles and make a new document that has a transparent background so we can see how clean that is. This little tiny, hey, come back here. This little tiny head, Command plus, and we'll paste that. And if we create a new layer and we put it underneath and we fill it with black, we can see if there's any ghosting, and there isn't. The and the aliasing around the edges is clean. Now, if we go back to this doll again, one of the concerns here would be the semi-transparent wings. How well is that going to get selected with any tool? So if we use this one for this, which it would be select color range, the only problem this one's going to run us into is the whites of the eyes. So here, when you choose this choice, the default fuzziness is 40. I just know that from using Photoshop since I was born. And then I'll select the white or the main eyedropper. The eyedropper word went out of my brain, now it came back. So the eyedropper, click once, yay. Okay, so now I have all that white. Then I'll switch to the eyedropper with the plus, and I can see where these anomalies are, where these little not selected bits are right near the yellow ribbon. And it's a little confused over here. It's not so clear about these shoes, so I'll do that, and I can just get this right up to the edge. And now it will be selected, or some facsimile thereof. With this selection on, you can see here, let's turn the workspace back. I'm going to reset my workspace to Essentials, and then I can click on the Refine Edge button, and I will see there's some scariness, okay? Now, the scariness is essentially jagged pixels and little bits of white that didn't get selected, or white that did get selected, such as in the white of the eyes. So here I'll do the Smart Radius, and it doesn't care. And I will kind of choke that in a little. Now what that's doing is it's smoothing the edge, but it's also choking it in probably a little bit too much. And I'll smooth it. Smooth can create blobby selections, so you want to be very careful about that. This is a tool I use very sparingly. And then the feather, I'll use the up arrow just to make a tad of feather. Now that's probably okay. We're going to get a selection there. Okay, there is a selection. If I add a new layer, because I don't want to cut this out initially, just want to test it, and I come back over here to my black and white chip, and I fill the inverse. So what's selected is the outside edge. Yes, that's correct. And deselect. That's what my selection looks like. Another way to view this selection, which might be more effective for you, I'm going to throw this layer away, is to come over here and click on the Quick Mask button. The Quick Mask button allows you to see the selection as if it were pixel content. That was this button right down here. Marching Ants method, Quick Mask method. See, what that's doing is allowing me to see where the edges of my selection are and might need to be tweaked. So here I can flip to white, go to the brush, make sure the brush is small enough, and probably needs more of a hard type of an edge. I have it at hardness 90, and then I will clean out any of these anomalies, completely clear these out, and then when I flip back to selection method, they won't be selected anymore. So I'll flip back and I can see, well, some of this might need to be cleaned out. What you're creating when you create a quick mask is, and again, coming back to this whole channels thing, is you're creating an alpha channel on the fly. It's right here. It's called quick mask. You can just keep this as a selection by turning it back to normal selection mode and doing select, save selection. New channel. And now if I click just on this and deselect, I can look at it at the same time as I'm looking at my work. This is another way to perfect this channel. If this thing has to be uber super perfect, I can now see where I need to really clean out the channel. Make sure, however, that you are actually painting on the right thing, that you're not inadvertently painting on your RGB content, that you are selected on the alpha channel itself. That's probably the biggest takeaway from this method. Even though this is on white, making a nice clean selection for this, could take a couple of steps. If you love the pen tool, by all means, you should use the pen tool. I find the pen tool to be really cumbersome in Photoshop. I don't like the way it feels. And that's just me. But in Illustrator, I live and die by the pen tool. So that's a whole other thing. Another method that is a great one to know about, and I'm just going to touch on this very, very briefly, is the idea of being able to take an Illustrator file itself, and this comes back into being able to extract alpha channels or use a pen tool and open up an Illustrator as if it was a Photoshop file. So there are methods where you can draw in Illustrator and actually create a file that you can use as a mask. And I'm going to just quickly load Illustrator here and show you what I'm talking about. Some people really love the pen tool in Photoshop. Some people only use Photoshop and never use Illustrator their whole life. But I like to use them together. And that has afforded me just a lot of extra flexibility. And this kind of falls into the category of smart objects also. But what I can do is in Photoshop, I'll create a document that is the same size as my Photoshop document of my fairy. So I'll go to image size and just take a look at what this would be. It would be very small, but 6 1/4 square, which is nice for me because I can remember that. And then I'll go and create a new file in Illustrator, and I can make my file that exact same size, 6.25, tab, 6.25, 25. Okay. And then I could do a file place, and I'll get my doll here. She's so cute. Okay. And then, because I don't love the Illustrator, the Photoshop pen tool, I like the Illustrator one, is I can zoom in here and actually start drawing this with my pen tool in Illustrator. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but I really find that they're very different. And let's try that again. Click and drag. They're in Illustrator now. There is the more inference method, which wasn't there before, which kind of shows you where your curve is going to go to. I don't know if you've been using it at all, people, but that is what is happening here. So I'm just going to do part of this, just the head again. And I'm creating a path that I can then bring into Photoshop as a much more accurate stencil. I'm going to close this for a second. I'm going to flip this over so it's outlined. That's okay. And now I have a path. So I'm going to do edit copy. And when I paste this over, pixels, path, or shape layer, path. So now I should have just pasted a path. There it is. It's not lined up. But I could draw the entire path, come back path. Let's try that again. Let me go to the path palette, window, paths, and it's called work path. Because it is not saved as a path yet, I can, hey, work path, come over to the path tools. These are the path tools. In Photoshop, it is now working in a vector mode. It is not a vector, but it is working in a vector mode. And I can move this path to where it goes. If I had drawn the whole thing and brought it in, it would have aligned more correctly. So I will do that. And then once I build the whole path and get everything in place, you need to change the name. Do not leave it work path. If you leave it work path, it will go away. You need to make sure that you give it a name. So I'm going to call this doll path. And then
You have the same effect just with the pen tool in Photoshop, and you can edit the anchor points after the path is already made.
yes.
So why?
Why? Because I just like the way the pen tool in Illustrator feels better. Because I'm that much of a princess. I just like it better. Yeah, and I can still edit this as well. So if I use the direct selection tool, I can still click on these points and move them. It's just a matter of personal preference. I'm not saying one is better or the other. I'm saying for me it is. I just find it easier. I just like that tool better. When I work with the pen tool in Photoshop, It bothers me. I don't like the feeling of it. It feels clunkier to me, and it's just not as precise. Maybe I'm insane. It wouldn't be the first time anyone thought that. All right. Can I ask for any other questions? I'm sure you guys have some good questions.
We
Yes,
need the mic or not?
Bridget?
No.
Okay.
What's the difference between puppet warp and liquefy again?
Puppet warp versus liquefy. Well, puppet warp is giving you anchor points. And this is actually a really good example to use for puppet warp. So I'm just deleting that path and zooming out. And liquefy is a little more freehand. So if I do filter and I choose liquefy, liquefy is more painterly. You can probably do some of the same things here. Liquefy is generally used to kind of like narrow things, and squish them. So now she, has a different personality. Right, kind of being rough on her there. But like she's a whole other being. Option key will turn your cancel into a reset button. So now I should have reset that, but it is not resetting. All right, so that is liquefy, which puppet warp is a whole different thing. Now puppet warp will require this to work properly on a transparent layer. So I'm going to double click to unlock the layer and then do a very hacky hack, remove the background. And I'll do it with the select color range. Okay, it's very messy, but I'm still going to delete the background and deselect. So now that she has a transparent background, I can do the puppet warp. The advantage of this is that I can anchor these points here. And in fact, I'm going to press escape, and then I'm going to duplicate this layer. Okay, so I will have one hiding and one showing. And the reason why is this. I'm going to go and show you how I could use this as 2 frames of an animation. So I'm going to use puppet warp. I'm going to anchor her neck and create points on her arms, at her shoulders, and just to keep it simple here on the middle of her hands. I could do a lot more with this, but with the time that we have, I think this is probably a good way to go with this. So now I'm going to click on this, and I need to anchor her body, otherwise she's going to go spinning around the room, and I don't want her to do that. I just want her head to move. Okay, so now her head is here, and her little hand here is going to go up. Right, so it's not hardly as distorted as puppet warp. You can probably do puppet warp more gentle than I was doing it, but all right, so that's one, and I'll hit return, and now hide and show. Okay, so I can do puppet warp again, edit, puppet warp. Again, I'm going to anchor the places where I don't want her to move, so I'm going to anchor throughout, and then add to the shoulders and to the hands. And she can put her hands in the air like she just don't care. Okay. And now her head wants to go the other way. And then she'll be like dancing like a Peanuts character from the Peanuts movies. All right, so let's see if we can like... So that's the main difference. Is liquefy, it's really just kind of subtle squishing. What I might do with liquefy as opposed to puppet puppet warp that would be good is make someone sad, make someone who's sad happy. That's a good use of liquefy, I think. If you do it really subtly, you cannot tell. If you really start wailing on the thing, it usually looks kind of scary. So to be honest, liquefy, oh, sorry, honey, I didn't mean it. All right, let's open the liquefy panel again. I didn't mean it. All right, I'm going to zoom in, and H for hand tool. Oh, scale that, make it bigger, zooming in, scroll. And now she's just a little pensive there. She could be happier. Make the brush smaller, left bracket key. Subtle, because her mouth is about 19 pixels total. But there, definitely looks happier now. Admit it. She's like gleeful. Okay. After, before, after. Would you like to have coffee? Sure. That's why I like, one over the other. That was a great question. Thank you for asking that. Next question.
On the car file, it showed the puppet warp as like a separate layer below.
Okay, on the car file, let's look at that car file again. Car, command minus. All right, well, that was in the composite, okay? So in the composite, what is really happening here is these are being drawn from or pulled from the main car image. So the puppet warp part of this here, it's on top, right there, on off, like a filter. And if we go back to doll, this is a JPEG, so it's not showing the puppet warp layers, which is a really good point to bring up. So when I add puppet warp as a PSD, it keeps it as an alterable, modifiable layer, or a layer control. And here in the composite, in Cars in Space, what's also neat about this is it's using a smart filter. And it's using a smart filter because this is a smart object. And this is not a smart object. This is raw pixels that have been puppet warped. And this is a smart object. And that's a huge differentiation, a huge distinction. So in the other one, those pixels are permanently damaged, and in this one, they are not. And the other thing that's great about, again, the smart objects is that you can scale these things and really lose very little detail because it's pulling from an original image. Smart filters applied to this layer will be turned off temporarily while the transformation is being previewed. So it's good to check this out because if I scale this like a lot and I want to have it overlapping the other one so I can see what's behind and what is in front, even if I just do it that much and return, it still keeps the puppet warp aligned properly with the content. And that's because this is a smart object. Thanks. It's like, it's a smart object, and because it's a smart object, when I apply the puppet warp, it applies it like turns it into the mode of a smart filter.
But you initially said it was a place linked.
It is a linked file, which is a smart object. A linked file is a smart object.
Oh,
it's a Photoshop CC 2015 lingo change. A language change. You know how they do that? They change the name of things. They do that just to make. Yeah, they do that. Question?
Smart objects. If the original file is like 600 pixels.
Yes.
And the file that I'm placing it into, I stretch it to 800. Will it become pixelated? Is the smart object best kept original size?
Best.
In the new file?
Well, you can see that this is not pixelated. I mean, it's not great, but it's not really pixelated. It's getting a little bit lossy, but it's not becoming jaggy. A lossy means it's picking up some other colors because it was originally a JPEG. It is always best to, instead of making things bigger in Photoshop, to make them smaller. But to avoid that problem, there is a very simple trick that you can do to resize your images before you put them in the composite if you're afraid of them being too small. And I'll tell you what that is right now. So what that is if I go to doll, she's ready for this, is she's really small. This is actually quite a small image, and it's really likely that this would come out pretty poorly, especially since this was initially a JPEG, and the fact that she's got this scary lossy pixels. Like, where did this green and this coral color get introduced from? Really hard to know that. But we could retouch them out a little bit. I'll do just a quick little clone stamp to get those to go away. And I'm just going to do it to this layer only, not to the layer beneath, just very quickly, just to clean this up a little bit. And so that you can see that they're gone. And she's going to kind of become a little different, but she's really same person at heart. Even though she, yeah, even, thank you. And really reasonable prices too. All right, so that's clean. And if we go to this image and we go to image size, this is important because this is a very low resolution image. This is something that I learned working in the industry, especially with direct mail pieces, where clients would give us these tiny little illustrations, like for a piece that had like a 3D model in it, like Autodesk was a client of ours, and they would just send us these tiny things, and we'd be like, how are we supposed to make that look better? So we started experimenting, and one day it just kind of hit us that the best way to resize an image is to always make sure that you're doubling. So it's better to resize something by percentage than by a key size. So if you have something that's 6¼ inches and you want it to be 18 inches, it's better to quadruple it and then scale it down smaller than to make it the exact size that you want it to be, especially if that number, or really because that number is not a square number. So a pixel is square. So if you double a pixel, you don't make 4 pixels. I mean, you don't make 2 pixels. When you double 1 pixel, you get 4 pixels, right? You double it, it's got to get twice as wide and twice as tall. So if you use 200, 300, 400%, and make sure you are resampling, this should be 72, okay, even though this is still low resolution, and then you look for your interpolation choices. I'm going to go over these with you really quickly here. Bicubic, nearest neighbor, and bilinear. These are the 3 main categories. There are a few other bicubics now to sort of help with enlargement and reduction, but what these are really doing is the following. Nearest neighbor is really just going to double the pixel. If you have a pink pixel that's next to a purple pixel, you'll get 4 purples and 4 pinks. You won't get something in between that's lavender or something. It's just straight on increasing the number of pixels, color for color. No changing, no interpretation at all. Bilinear looks to the left and the right and above and below each pixel, like in a cross configuration. And it calculates the new pixels based on the colors that it sees above, below, and left and right. And bicubic does it on above, below, left, right, and on all corners. So you get the most change or subtlety if you choose bicubic, but sometimes things look a little sharper at nearest neighbor. At bilinear, I'm sorry. Bilinear versus bicubic. Nearest neighbor is great for screenshots, bicubic for most photographs. And you can see here we have bicubic reduction, where it's throwing away data, and bicubic smoother, where it's enlarging, and bicubic details, if you had important details. So here I'm going to choose smoother. And it's 400, and it was 9.27 megs, and now, I'm sorry, it was 593K, and now it's going to be 9.27 megs, which is pretty large. And it's really actually looks pretty darn good. And then you can just run a simple sharpen filter on it. Don't get too fancy. Just go with your basic sharpen. Okay, that looks like it did nothing. Or better yet, let's go to sharpen and talk about this one, unsharp mask. Now, if you've noticed that this is supposed to be a sharpen tool, but it has the name unsharp. It's kind of odd. We're trying to sharpen things, not unsharpen them. Well, what it's doing is it's looking for what pixels have too little contrast next to other pixels that it calculates should be a different color, and it increases the contrast between pixels. In general, the way this should be used is by using a small amount. You see what happens if I increase the pixel radius? Too much. A small amount, like 2, 3, 4 pixel radius, and amount of sharpening is what you want to decrease or increase. So that is a little plagued there, but it's a very subtle type of sharpening. So it's creating contrast, and you want to try to find that balance. Let's see if we even think it looks better. After, before, after, it's very slight. If you come over to filter though, and you run that same filter again, now it looks sharper. And if I go Command F, it's running it the third time. Now, considering that there's so much lossiness in this, I do have a lot more sharpness in the eyes. If I go to Window and I open up my History panel, for those of you who are fans of the History panel, there is a key command for the history steps, but if we jump back here, we had that versus this. You know, it really depends on the person. It's just some that would be highly imperceptible. All right, folks. I can take one more question. We're about to wrap up, though. Any more? Was that helpful? Did you guys learn something? Yes? Well, that is it. That is the end of the show. It was wonderful to meet you all. Again, I'm going to end the recording now. I will see you on the internet. I really hope that you guys come and learn more Photoshop.